This is my theme song. It isn't too long. Why I don't teach Sunday school. Welcome to the fourth episode of Why I Don't Teach Sunday School, where I make a well-meaning attempt to explore the best-selling but least read book of all time and share with you what I remember about it, almost exclusively with illustrations stolen from Google image search. If you haven't seen episodes 1 through 3, I would highly suggest you check those out first. Follow along in your Bible if that's your thing. I should make it clear that my synopsis is not a version of the Bible accepted to be the inspired work of God by, anyone, really. So yeah, if you want to know what's actually in the book, blow the dust off the cover and give it a read. Also, there are plenty of free places online to read all the popular translations for free side by side. I like Bible Hub and use that site extensively for every episode, but they don't pay me to say that. So getting right to it, Genesis chapter 20. As I mentioned in the previous chapter, Abraham had seen the black smoke rising out of the plain of Jordan in the aftermath following the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. I imagine that Abraham had to have presumed his nephew and his family to be dead. His mood had to be somewhat mixed though. He had, after all, just been directly promised a child with his 90-year-old wife Sarah within the year, but it was not apparent that she was pregnant as of yet at the start of chapter 20. There's a lot of stuff going on in Abraham's life at this time, and Abraham decides it's time for another move. He packs up his household and heads for Gerar. What happens when he gets there is just, well, okay, when he gets there he starts referring to his 90-year-old wife as my sister again, because he fears the Gerarians are going to murder him so they can have sex with his 90-year-old wife. Just let that sink in for a second. For one thing, I guess murder was just a more socially acceptable act in that society than adultery. So, yeah. And just like the Pharaoh in years before, Abimelech did take the old woman into his harem. It would be worth noting now that Abimelech is not necessarily the character's name, since it's similar to Pharaoh. Abimelech is just the name all Philistine kings of the era are given. Also similar to Pharaoh, Abimelech's harem became infertile immediately upon Sarah's arrival because, God put a curse on them because they had another man's wife among them. Or, you know, it's like the same curse for the same sin of adultery as before. Totally got an STD. And so, God came to Abimelech in a dream and told him, "You are as good as dead because of Sarah. She is another man's wife." So Abimelech pleaded with God, explaining that he had not yet had sex with the 90-year-old woman, and he had clearly been misled by the couple into believing that they are siblings, and presumably not, also married. And God was like, "I know, that's why I did not let you have sex with her." God goes on to say, "Abraham's a prophet. Just give him his wife back and he'll pray for you and you will live. But if you don't, you and all who belong to you will die." And so Abimelech angrily summons Abraham, basically to say, WTF, man, you said that she was your sister, and now I've got the creator of the universe threatening to kill me and everyone in my household. So basically, Abraham then replies that he was afraid he was going to be killed for the love of his 90-year-old wife. And he went on to explain that Sarah had agreed to play along with his whole "you are my sister" routine anytime they traveled to a new place. It was her way of showing Abraham that she loved him. Is Abraham into this whole wife sharing with the locals thing? Is Abraham a cuckold? Because, that's a thing. And just when you think it can't get any weirder, Abraham tells Abimelech that technically he and Sarah had not lied to him. That is, indeed, Sarah was his sister, at least half-sister. She was the daughter of his father, though not of his mother. Are you kidding me? Wait, did I just gloss over that in one of those genealogy charts I flash up there for like 1.5 seconds and no one pays attention to? Oh crap, I did. So Sarah really is Abraham's sister/wife. So what's Abimelech to do for having been tricked by these crafty Hebrews who are Abraham and Sarah? Exile? Imprisonment? Execution? Oh no, he pays them in sheep, cattle, male and female slaves, a blank check to live anywhere they want in Gerar, and 1,000 shekels of silver to compensate Abraham for any of the damage this episode may have done to Sarah's reputation. Hey, let's do math. According to Wikipedia, the shekel of the time was 17 grams, so that was 17,000 grams of silver. Assuming that silver has more or less paced inflation over the last 3,500 years, as of this writing, silver is $17.82 per gram. So Abimelech paid Abraham just over $300,000 in today's terms to compensate Abraham for the damage to Sarah's reputation. Yep, that's what he did. Once he did this, Abraham prayed for Abimelech and healed them so that they could all have children again. Did you hear that? Abraham prayed to heal Abimelech and his harem so that they could have children again. From what affliction causing infertility did Abraham pray to heal them from? Chapter 21. Well, it's been an interesting year in biblical times since episode 3. Since that time, there's been the mass circumcisions, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, the whole Abimelech infertility adultery scandal, and now it's time for that baby that God promised Abraham and Sarah a year ago. And good to his word, Sarah gave birth to Isaac, and Abraham, good to his word, circumcised him after he was 8 days old. Once Isaac was weaned, Abraham threw a party to celebrate the arrival of his son. Now, with all this attention being paid to the newborn, and given that he was a 14-year-old kid, Ishmael was caught mocking, presumably mocking Isaac, and Sarah caught him. Sarah pretty much hated and abused Hagar from the time she gave Abraham the hall pass with her some 14 years prior. Upon seeing her 14-year-old stepson being less than 100% respectful, she flew off the handle demanding, "Get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac." Abraham was a bit, conflicted about that demand, but God told him to do whatever Sarah asked, because his promise to Abraham will be fulfilled through Isaac. So, the next morning, Abraham gave Hagar and Ishmael a picnic lunch and turned them out into the desert to fend for themselves, alone and on foot. Just like that. All the camels, livestock, servants, all the everything that Abraham had, and he kicked the two of them out forever the moment Isaac was viable, on foot, and with basically a picnic lunch. What a shitty severance. Hagar and her son wandered the desert on foot until their minimal supplies were exhausted. She placed the exhausted and dehydrated 14-year-old Ishmael under a bush and walked off far enough away that she wouldn't be able to hear his final retching breaths as he died of dehydration. Then an angel overheard his desperate sob and asked his mother, "What's the matter, Hagar?" I can only imagine what went through Hagar's mind. "What the f*** do you think is the matter, you heavenly asshole?" "Don't worry. Pick the boy up by the hand. And by the way, you look kind of thirsty. Were you looking for some water? There's some water right here. Didn't you see the well?" So, having narrowly escaped a horrible death by dehydration in the desert, Ishmael went on to take up archery and married an Egyptian woman not unlike his own mother. Back at Abraham's place, Abimelech and his military commander Phicol kindly requested that Abraham not mislead them anymore regarding anything, like he did with the whole sister-wife incident, and rather deal with them honestly and fairly going forward. Abraham wholeheartedly agreed that that was reasonable, and then Abraham went on to complain to them about some well which Abimelech's people had seized for their own. And Abimelech was like, "I don't know anything about that." And so Abraham bribed Abimelech 7 baby lambs to admit that Abraham had dug the well. Abimelech and Phicol obliged, and then called the meeting a success and went home. Now, chapter 22 is one of the most famous, disturbing, troublesome stories from Genesis, and unlike most of the stories I'm sharing with you, you may have actually heard this one. So God tells Abraham, "Take your son, your only son whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." Apparently, this is how God treats the people he really, really loves. That is, by asking them to kill the people they love the most purely as an expression of their love for him. Touching, really, isn't it? But let's not reflect on how messed up that is for a moment, and notice something else here. God said, "Take your son, the only son whom you love, Isaac." Let us note that the punctuation was never part of the original text, and so God is either saying that Isaac is Abraham's only son, and Abraham loves him, or he's saying Isaac is the only son Abraham loves. Either way, the wording is pretty dismissive of Ishmael. Poor Ishmael. Moving on. God instructs Abraham to kill his son Isaac as a sacrifice. Not just in the backyard or something, but rather on top of a mountain 3 days' journey away. Abraham probably believed his God to be an honest sort of God who keeps his promises. Recall how he praised the Almighty's sense of righteous justice while pleading for the fate of Sodom years prior. Abraham likely also believed it to be highly improbable that Isaac would be capable of carrying on his line, thus fulfilling God's explicit promise after he ties him up, slits him in two with a dagger, and sets him on fire. It therefore follows that Abraham had to know one of two things must be true. One, God was not going to allow him to go through with this explicit instruction, or two, Isaac was going to have to impregnate someone before they got to the sacrifice site. Now, option one seems like the behavior of an equally insecure and sadistic God, so I imagine that eventuality would have seemed unlikely to the faithful Abraham. Therefore, logically, Abraham would have known that for God's promise to be fulfilled, Isaac would have to impregnate someone before they made it to the designated site for the sacrifice. I know you're saying, that doesn't make sense. Isaac was just a little boy. Was he? Why do you think that? Is that what you learned in Sunday school? To be clear, I do not know precisely how old Isaac is in this story. We only know that it happened sometime later after Isaac's birth and before his mother's death. We will soon read that Sarah died at age 127. Given that Isaac was born to her at age 90, logically, he must have been somewhere between 0 and 37. We also know he's old enough to carry up a mountain enough wood for a burnt sacrifice. So, at minimum, let's say 8 years old. And when the angel calls out to Abraham, he says, "Do not lay a hand on the boy." In Hebrew, the word translated here as boy in reference to Isaac is Hanar. I don't know if I said that right, but humor me. Okay, a bit of a future spoiler here. But that word, Hanar, is the same noun used in reference to Absalom after his death. The same Absalom who just fucks 10 of David's girlfriend in rapid succession on the roof while onlookers gawked and ate popcorn or whatever. I know you're probably dying to hear that story now, but I'm not going to get to that part until at least October of 2020. If you can't wait that long, put a bookmark in your Bible where you are now, because I know you're following along, and read 2 Samuel. If you just want to fast forward to the orgy scene, it starts in chapter 16, verse 20. What was I talking about? Oh, right. The age of Isaac when God told Abraham to sacrifice him. So, perhaps the word boy used here could have just as easily been translated as young man past the age of sexual maturity. And when that same word was used in the case of Absalom, it meant young man capable of sex with a lot of different partners on a single day. So, you see where I'm going here. It is plausible that the agenda for the trip to Mount Moriah involved Abraham getting his son laid with as many partners as possible to ensure God's promise would be fulfilled. And then, having spread his seed all across the Negev, Isaac is martyred dramatically at the hands of his own father for his God. In a parallel universe, this is how Genesis 22 goes down. But in this universe, Abraham is stopped dramatically at the last second by an angel, because God himself could not be bothered to stop the action caused by his own commandment to Abraham. This story is generally presented as a test of Abraham's faith and a demonstration of his complete commitment to God, and it is. But if you think about it, Abraham had to know that either his God is a liar or he knew that he had to get his son laid. It's also a bit bothersome to me that God delegated canceling the order to sacrifice to an angel. Chapter 23. Sarah died. She was 123 years old. Her widower Abraham was 133 years old. Abraham made a deal to buy a field containing a cave for which to bury her, and the locals did not want to take his money. But he insisted, and eventually he was officially deeded the land for $120,000, accounting in today's money, and buried her in the cave facing the booby tree he loved so much. And on that downer, I must conclude this episode of Why I Don't Teach Sunday School. If you haven't done so already, click like and subscribe and check out the other episodes in the series. Your likes are what keeps me up till 2 a.m. editing videos. Check back next Tuesday, January 28th for episode 5, Mama's Boy Guide to Screwing Your Dumb Hairy Brother. One love. Peace out, bitches. This is my theme song.